Here's Melanie. Okay, so,
Yep, I'm just getting the,
okay, yep.
all right. In one moment, it's a little, like I said, a little slow on my end. All right, so welcome everybody. My name is Steven Comstock. I work with Strike Tax Advisory. Also do some moonlighting on the side, advising small businesses. And today we're going to be talking about global outsourcing. Last week, I think it was Anna brought up some considerations about hiring offshore and some of her concerns. I had made a statement about, this is still a great opportunity. There's lots of opportunity to outsource globally, and talk to Jeff about speaking later in that meeting. So here we are now. I was also going to talk about R&D tax credits. They do actually play a role in this, but I think what I'll do is I'll save that for another day, and we'll just stick to global outsourcing. So I brought along with me Vlad from Ventive and Chris from Framework. Both are Inc. 5000 honorees, multi-year. Both are in the tech field. Ventive specifically in digital innovation for software and mobile applications and product marketing, and Chris in IT and voice over IP technology and just overall global, they provide global services and recommendations for a lot of companies nationally and internationally. All right, so today we don't have much time, so I wanted to bring the big guns with me, but this will be a high level overview. So we'll go ahead and just kind of go through things quickly, at least on my part, and then hopefully give some opportunity for Q&A. And then I'll share the contact information for both Vlad and Chris. I think they could be tremendous value adds for your network. They certainly have been for mine. And we'll go from there. So this is my first time using Google Slideshow, so I'm not sure what makes it move, but there we go. All right, so like no trust. I guess this is a theme of the group. So and it makes a lot of sense. I really value, I've only been one time, but I see a lot of value in this group. Everybody seems to know each other. I've talked to a few of you already offline. So, I think that this is actually really important. So I'm a California native. My maternal grandmother's side goes all the way back to the beginning of California. And I've lived in San Francisco and Ventura, Santa Barbara for majority of my life.
Hey, Steve, can you hear us?
Steve.
Yeah, you can't hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but can you play the presentation?
Oh, you can't see the presentation?
Yeah, we can see the admin side. I want to see the actual presentation.
Oh, okay. That's strange. Maybe it's because what about now?
It's frozen.
No, we can see your mouse move, but it's on
okay.
the other side. We need to see the actual slideshow. So maybe share the other screen or tab.
Yeah, let me go back and forth. Give me a sec. Well, that stinks.
You see the secret sauce.
Yeah, so basically, Steve, it's not terrible. We see the slides, but we see your notes and everything on it.
Oh, okay. That is terrible. That's not the right one.
If you share your screen and look at the screen it shows up on, that's the one you should share with us.
Yep, we're good. Yep. I got it now. Thanks, guys. I confused myself. All right, so
it's
here
beautiful.
we go.
Excellent.
There we go.
All right. Well, so that's my great rundown, and here's the agenda, just for a refresher, and so we can forget about the past. All right, moving on. All right, so California native. We already talked about that. I've lived a lot with my sister's family as a military brat, so I've had the benefit of spending my summers of my early life in Nebraska and between Nebraska and California. And then later we moved to Germany for my first 2 years in high school. And then I wrapped up in Southern California. But this is the family. That's my favorite place. It's Fort Jones on the bottom left. That's my uncle in the top right. He lives there and has lived there forever. So big fan of cycling. I've got the little icons on the top: cycling, meditation, fishing, the ocean, mountains. A big lover of landscapes. And I've lived, like I said, I think I've said, but I've also lived in Illinois, and I've lived off and on now in Mexico. And a lot of where I've lived has defined a lot of my perspective on people in general. I've lived in places heavily influenced by immigrant populations, and I've lived in places where people are. Let's put it this way: I've walked with kings, but I've also walked with not kings, and I've befriended and worked with war refugees, and you kind of get that exposure gets you kind of an idea of the vast amount of opportunity that is still untapped in this world. So professionally, I've been a global leader and trainer on a team of 300 that had places throughout the world. My first client ever was Dilma, which is a Sri Lankan tea company, not very famous in the United States, but globally they are. When I was working with them, about $16 billion was the global tea market, and most of that was commodity tea. So we were bringing specialty tea into the United States at that time, and Dilma was my client. And that actually plays kind of a bit into my perspective a little later on. Advent is where I got the most exposure. They're an accounting software program. Like I said, they've got a global support team. They've got companies throughout the world. I've worked with a lot of them. Also Yardi, same, biggest property management, asset management software in the world. They've got support around the world, primarily in India. Now I've also advised people. So the ones that I felt comfortable sharing, Francesca Kenny, B2B CFO. I actually got her virtual assistant placed pretty quickly into her becoming a CFO. And also MetaBeast, that's an NFT with utility, as he likes to say. But we're working on their business development right now, and we've got about 16 people helping on the marketing side, and a lot of these are international. And this, to give you perspective, is about 4 times more. He got 4 times more with his budget by hiring international. So what are the benefits? Obviously, lower cost of living is a competitive advantage. Not for you, for them. They can come in and they can do work cheaper because they have a lower cost of living. And also, for about 30 years, Fortune 500 companies have been hiring and training a lot of people overseas or offshore. What this has done is this has given access to a global workforce. And what I mean by that is, these bigger companies have kind of paved the way, but they're so stuck in their ways that really there's a lot of opportunity there to hire trained talent for nominal costs. A great example, a good friend of mine is an accountant that's worked at EY and Deloitte, wanted a specific job in accounting for 150 US American dollars. That's what she would need to be able to justify a move within her country. 150 US dollars a month, and that was turned down. So that's the kind of opportunity we're dealing with. A 3% raise for somebody that's talented is a $3 raise an hour. That's the sort of talent that we've got access to. We've also got 24/7 coverage. Different religions are regionally throughout the world. They like different days off. Friday is a big one for some countries because of Muslims have some religious, it's not a Sabbath day, but they have some religion parts on Friday. The Jewish population, Saturday specifically. This gives us access to a global workforce that can work 24/7. And then obviously bilingual services, Latin services in particular, are a great opportunity in the United States. You can get support in your time zone, just going right down the line for all the countries in Central and South America. Hiring best practices, this is where I think it's really important. There are a lot of placement companies, people that will help you find people. And a lot of these people want to place you with somebody. I always say you need to interview them first. Doesn't matter. Don't place anybody, interview them. Second thing is an employee growth plan. You want to give these people growth, and you want to give them compensation for it. It's nominal for you to incentivize them on even a quarterly basis based off performance. This keeps them engaged and a part of your team. Understand the liability when using third parties. Some of these third parties are just middlemen. They come in, they offer no guarantees or liability. They're placing, and sometimes they're placing at 50% of your fees. So they are the in-between at 50% of the fees. That's 50% of the money that is not going to your employee, it's going to them, and they have absolutely no liability. I always say hire to supplement, if not to specialize, especially for fractional CFOs, not necessarily for your clients. If you're building a team, you can supplement your team with people offshore and give them the opportunity to come in and develop on your team. Hire to supplement your team, not to specialize. This actually is a tool for your team to be better. Specialized talent does need specialized leaders. So, we're not saying go out and hire people to go develop a software for you. Venev is an example. They develop software. You need a leader like that, Vlad, who is a CTO, who's going to be able to manage your team. You can't expect to be able to hire someone super specialized offshore and be able to give them what they need to be successful. And then that kind of goes into the hiring pitfalls. Unconscious bias. We all know it. Just the obvious one is offshore or developing country, trust, etc. That unconscious bias, certainly that's one that we need to overcome, and we're all willing to overcome if we're willing to consider outsourcing. The other one is hiring affordable doesn't mean hiring cheap. And we have this like subconscious notion of hiring somebody for cheap, we're going to give them the cheap work to do. You can hire a grown adult and they'd be willing to sweep the floor, but doesn't mean that we've got refugees, right, that are doctors that then become store clerks. That's the mindset that you want to get away from. There's access to talent. Accounting specifically is a big one that I'm familiar with. Access to talent that you can really use. Don't feel like you need to give your affordable work the cheap work. And when you work with vendors, they can replace mid-job. So be careful of hiring through vendors because they might have a need somewhere else or a better paying client, or maybe their employee complained and they want to keep that employee happy. They may replace them mid-job, so you need to be mindful of that. And then obviously the big one for strike tax advisory is you miss labor-based incentives if you hire offshore. Again, if you hire to supplement, not necessarily to specialize. The R&D tax credit's a big one in the United States. You can't take advantage of that if you're not hiring labor in the United States. And that's a huge incentive that you want to consider. Same with the RTC tax credit. That was the tax credit that came out 2020 to 2021. That's $26,000 that companies got if they showed a dip in profitability revenue, and it was up to $26,000 per employee. So now we'll go ahead and hand it over to Vlad, CEO of Ventive. I've known Ventive and his co-founder for over a decade. Incredible company. They've built multiple high growth companies. They build really big software products that are that scale beyond the MVP. So they build products that are ready to scale. They pay attention to things like technical debt, making sure that your resources are actually aligned with the long-term vision. And I'll go ahead and pass it to him now.
Thanks, Steven. So Steven reached out to me and asked me to speak a little bit about my experiences with working with offshore developers, designers, offshore SDRs. These are like sales representatives. And I've worked a little bit with offshore assistants. So I've kind of narrowed it down for you guys a little bit, and maybe open it up for some additional questions later, so we can, you guys can specifically ask me things about it. At Ventive, we have about 46 developers and 20 plus designers, product managers, project managers, product owners, and SDRs. So I have a wide range of experience working with individuals outside of the US, additionally in Canada, and just all over the world, really. I've been in the industry now for about 17 plus years. I started off in healthcare, developing software applications for nurses, CNAs, social workers. And then I moved into developing software at a digital agency where I was a director of web development. I was quickly fast-tracked to VP of engineering. Then I became a CTO here at Ventive, and recently was named a CEO and a partner at Ventive. So I've had a fast and furious, I guess, experience in tech. And that's mainly because I don't know, I live and breathe it, and I understand it, and I'm really passionate about it. So one of the areas where I was really successful and what helped me become successful was the way that I was able to understand and manage offshore resources. And I was able to boil that down after thinking about kind of like how that's possible. I was able to boil that down to three characteristic traits that I think an offshore resource needs to have, or you need to understand before really involving yourself with that resource. One of those things is trust. Like, you have to figure out how to trust that person, and if you don't trust them, then you should pretty much cut ties as soon as possible. That's something that I learn all the time. You bring a developer on, you try to give them the benefit of doubt, or a designer, they're not producing, they're not doing what you're asking them to do. You keep trying, and you don't really trust them to give them the work. And then this is more of like a pitfall, I guess, if you don't trust them. If you trust them, then you move on to the second part of it, which is availability. Do they have availability? A lot of offshore resources typically have jobs already, or they're a part of some type of an agency, or they're already working on other projects for you in a different department. So do they have availability? And then also, do they have availability to work on US time? Sometimes you can get lucky, like you can get on this time zone, but there are the majority of developers are in the I would say that like the IST time zone, on the eastern side. So you'd have to really work out with them, like when they can be available. Although you can, give them a task and allow them to work through the task overnight, and then you check up on them in the morning. It's typically not the case. You have to have some type of overlap to where you can have them available in the morning, so you can talk to them and plan and have them join meetings, that sort of a thing. The third one is experience. Even if they have full availability and you trust them 100%, they're not gonna, steal your IP or whatever. They still need to have experience to actually do something. And this one is actually kind of a tricky one, because they'll pass all of your tests. They'll speak all the right terminology, but they won't necessarily know how to do the job or finish the job. And this mainly happens because one or two reasons. One, they Googled it right before speaking to you, or they're part of some type of a team, a co-location wherein somebody else does the test for them, and then they just kind of ask them questions as they need it. So they're basically faking it until they make it. So this is one of those things that they need to have experience. They need to have proven, or show proof that they've achieved it. And they've done it, what you're asking them to do. And you can have them show you proof in many ways. One, they can, solve a problem for you. These same things also apply to hiring, US based remote, resources as well. It's the same struggles that you would have now with so many resources working from home. You still need to get on the call with them, just like what Steven was saying, interview them, work with them, and basically test them. Google has a really cool way of, interviewing their developers and managers by doing, pseudocode, or having them code right in front of them, having the camera on them, that sort of a thing. So you should be diligent and do your due diligence prior to, hiring them, because it could save you a lot of heartache in the future. So with payments, how we pay, this really depends on the type of resources you have. We've used in the past PayPal, Veeam is a good international one. Crypto, I haven't used crypto myself, but it seems like that would be a really easy way to do it. If they want to accept it, you can pay them in many different ways. We recently switched the entire organization to Veeam. That works for us, and we just require them all to set up Veeam accounts, and that's how we send our payments to them. Legal protection and recourse. This one's actually kind of a tricky one because I've had developers from the Ukraine and some in, I think it was Russia, that actually stole our code or the intellectual property and ask us to. They basically rant. They're like, we'll publish it to public GitHub account for everyone to download if you don't give us $400. It was so ridiculous. So we just gave them $400. Like, there's nobody you can contact and ask them to call this guy, because the name that they give you is usually wrong or made up. And because they would, if there was the real name and the government checks Veeam or whatever, they can't trace that money back to them. So there are those situations in countries that have either sanctions or tariffs or really high import export laws. It becomes a little tricky. We had a designer that was in Pakistan, and he needed a laptop. For us, like an iPad, for example, we wanted to send him one, but in order for us to send him one, he'd have to pay 2 or 3 times the cost of the laptop in order for him to actually use the laptop that's here. So we had to send him the right amount in order for him to go find the used one from somewhere else. It was a bit of a hassle. So if you want to help your developers or your designers, it becomes, or your resource officer, it becomes a little bit of a process.
The same for the accounting team, accountants that we've hired as well. I know we're running up on time, and I want to give Chris a chance to speak. Can you just speak to real quick about the agreements and then maybe the recourse?
Yeah, absolutely. You should have your non-disclosure agreement and your contractor agreements. Speak to your legal department about putting those together. They're much like the US-based remote or contractor agreements. We just make them sign it just like you would a US employee. They don't really hold up in any way, but they usually respect it. Recourse, it just depends. Some countries are good about it, but most countries won't really care about your claim. And usually if you're smart enough, like at the last point here, protect yourself by controlling the keys, meaning any access, any email, everything, you should create those email accounts for them so that you can shut it off anytime you want. So if you control the keys, usually you're okay, and you're only out, a few $1,000s at the most. So.
Yeah, that's a solid segue, actually, framework. Thanks, Vlad. And Vlad has done the same thing with Strike. We have international folks too. Vlad is the one that oversees that for Strike. So that's something important. Introducing Framework. I've worked with Framework personally. I brought them on. I had about 350 stakeholders, about 20,000 end users. At that time, brought on Framework. This was a failing infrastructure. And Framework has a way of just bringing you online, forcing you to kind of adopt new things in an affordable way. And they work internationally. They have HIPAA compliant, or they have clients that require HIPAA compliance. And Chris will go ahead and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Chris Graham. I'm a CIO at Framework. So a little bit of my background: I graduated from the University of Iowa in computer science and have been a systems engineer and data engineer for the last 12 years or so. And in the last couple of years, I've sort of moved into the customer-facing consulting business within Framework. And so I've got a lot of experience and got to meet with a lot of companies to learn sort of the pitfalls on some of these things. And I came here today with a couple of slides sort of through the lens of working with those clients and working with SMBs and sort of the things that they see working internationally. The good thing that what I'm going to show you today is a lot of these practices are you don't even, this is how we should work. They're best practices. We don't have to really concern ourselves with global technology. We should already consider ourselves global technology. So some of these are just some of our key best practices that I present to clients and things that we've rolled out with numerous clients over the last couple of years. So, three of the main points here I want to go through with some of your business considerations that you need to take a look at. And then after that, sort of building around that framework of global security, and then some next steps after that once you've sort of figured out where you want to go. So here's some business, sort of to frame our conversation here, some business considerations. And this is especially important with your international employees is, how are they accessing your company data? We need to understand how that's working, right? Do we have it on premise and we're using a virtual private network? Do we work out of our email, which I'm not even looking at my notes right now, but I know I wrote that's a big no-no up in there, so you usually want to centralize some of these things. And then moving forward, like into SharePoint, Teams, Slack, are we using just Google Drive across the company? And then also our data that's out in SaaS applications or software as a service application. And here I put Salesforce, Dynamics, those sorts of things that are out in the cloud and that everyone's logging into and putting financial data or customer data, CRM, ERP, those sorts of things. So how are not only your United States or local employees, but international employees going to be accessing your data? You need to understand those requirements. And then the next point, which is usually I get the big groan on all the acronyms, right? Like, do we have a need to be compliant? And like Steven said, I have a number of HIPAA compliant, we're HIPAA compliant. If you need to have the compliancy, that already lays out the security framework for you. So I'm assuming in your careers as CFOs and in the financial world, you've worked in SOX, you've worked with GDPR, the new ones that are coming, CMMC, the cybersecurity model. Those are for working with government, NIST, ISO, and other government ISO requirements. So those are huge things that usually drive the force behind how are we securing our data, and they give you a framework for it. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. And then the last piece on that is who's paying attention to all these things and taking action. So the last piece of this big puzzle is somebody needs to be paying attention and taking remediation and closing those security gaps. And again, that even becomes more important as we start to bring in users, outside of our country and making sure we understand how they're accessing their data and being able to control that and take a vertical slice and look back and say how what was happening here. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So the next piece here is building around that global security. So these are just some basic steps that you've probably already seen inside your environment. And this first one here, I put, multi-factor authentication. I put an exclamation point after that, because if there's one piece that you remember out of what I'm about to tell you here today is go back to your teams and your security teams or whoever, your MSP, whoever happens to be in, and figure out where you're at with your MFA, your 2FA, whatever you want to call it, inside your environment. 95% of attacks take place inside of the person's email or trying to impersonate, spearing, phishing, whaling, those sorts of things. And if just MFA was in place, the attackers would have probably stopped. It was too much effort at that point, or it would have alerted someone. So just, again, a quick point on that, go back and just talk about MFA with your teams, and getting those enabled. Because part of my job as the security officer for my clients is, over the last probably year, I've done 40 cybersecurity agreements with their vendors. And I would say on 20% of them, the first line item says, do you have MFA enabled for your email or your business line apps? If no, don't bother filling out the rest of this document because we don't care what other security events that you have. Like if you don't do MFA, we're not going to cover you. So that's a huge one, the MFA, right? And then going past that, the virtual private network, VPN, I'm assuming a lot of you now we're in this new work from home world. VPN was probably spun up very quickly inside your environment. So it's probably not maybe even configured correctly, but we had to do it quickly as we all went home. And, a lot of my clients are like, I bought a license, I spun it up. I don't know who has access. I don't know what's going on with it, right? So that's a huge thing to essentially end-to-end encrypt your data as it's coming from, say, United States to India or wherever it happens to be. Encrypted email, this is a new one that a lot of people are moving into. There's certain levels of exchange that will allow you to do end-to-end encryption. A lot of enterprise level customers will be in sort of the 365 environment or the Exchange environment, but then there's also smaller companies that are using Google as their workspace. Google doesn't necessarily have an end-to-end encryption, but there's still options there. And then some other key points that to talk about is the centralized communication platform or unified communications. A lot of companies I see will bring in Teams, and then the financial team will be using Teams, but then the devs are using Slack. And so all of a sudden you've got sort of your rules in place for some people, but not others. And then that can spiral out. So who's paying attention to that? And then the last piece there that's sort of moving into the more of the enterprise is that user directory idea, like Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, Google Workspaces. And the reason we want to see those because they build the framework for setting permissions and logging and auditing. That's a huge thing for what I'm trying to drive here is you need to have the tools and the foundation in place so we can understand who's doing what and when. So when we go back and look at our logs or someone, your MSP or your NOC or SOC or whoever, it can say, hey, Thursday night, this event happened. I can see what happened. Here's exactly the breadcrumbs of what happened. And we can remediate. So those are the big steps. And then this final slide is sort of taking that next step, which is sort of where, you know, what I do and those steps before of moving into, you know, sort of the enterprise level. And that's logging, auditing, and remediation and closing those gaps. And we have what's called SIEM tools or security information and event management. And that's usually a catch-all for a number of tools that come together to help you do these things. Your Active Directory feeds the logs and then something pays attention to it and then alerts your team. You know, and so going back to the sort of compliance that we were talking about before, even if you don't have to be HIPAA compliant or Sarbanes-Oxley or SOC 2, GDPR, those were created to maintain security or data security or financial security. And they've already done the sort of hard work for you. They've laid the framework out. So even if you're not needing to be compliant in those, you might need to be in 2 years, 5 years, you go public. A lot of these things you might need. I'm working right now with a company that is trying to bring in Department of Defense work, and they sort of haven't done any of their NIST work or their CMMC work. And now we have 2 years of roadmap in front of us, when a lot of these things were really basic if we put them in place. So, you know, setting up some of those security pieces and then setting security champions, someone who's going to pay attention to that stuff and help you close those gaps. And like I said, you might not need it today, but maybe in 2 to 5 years you will, and you're ahead of the curve then, and you're protecting your environment. And then to follow up with that network logging, that's a huge one, especially when we talk about if we're centralizing or we have data living in an environment and we have people in other countries or other places accessing that, they need to usually do it through our networking equipment. So by having logging and event and you know, someone paying attention to that, it can help alleviate any sort of question marks or gotchas on what happened to our data, who was accessing what. And then this last piece that's sort of the next step up, and a lot of MSPs present this as as sort of an add-on to what they do, or, you know, they work with your IT companies, what we call SOC and NOC, the Security and Network Operations Center. And these sort of supplement your IT team. And for our smaller businesses, they're great because they might only have a part-time on-site guy or a full-time guy, but he's sort of help desk, he's not an engineer. So part of this is your security and network operations. What that they do is they supplement it by, they pay attention to your environment 24/7. So even though it's 5 o'clock and everyone went home, you're paying for someone to pay attention to your environment. So alerts will then get sent into the team, or they're taking care of it for you, so you don't have to pay attention to it. So a lot of my clients, sort of in that S space, moving into the M, you know, between 30 and 150, like to have that SOC and NOC, because then they know that they're taken care of 24/7. Someone's paying attention that if someone's trying to break into their systems or get onto their networks, there was someone paying attention, you know, in real time, alerting the IT team, hey, we've got an event, those sorts of things. So, you know, I know this was a lot of information all at once. I wanted to kind of just give a high level, you know, overview of that there's tools out there. And, you know, that's sort of what security people specialize in, you know, and, you know, and so I'm happy to answer any other questions or anything like that. But like I said, if you go back out of this today, go back and ask what's up with your MFA with your team, because that'll be the #1 line. So I appreciate the time and thank you for inviting me to speak today.
Excellent, Chris. I'll go ahead and just wrap up in 10 seconds here for you guys. You know, this was a lot, and this may not apply to you, but it could apply to your clients. And back to the whole hire to supplement, not to specialize. The same thing goes with learning this, understanding this. Your clients could actually use this. You talked about, I've heard cutting costs to maintain a competitive advantage. Doing the same for your clients, you can actually learn a lot and go through the process as well. So that's kind of why I wanted to give you guys the big picture here, kind of what it looks like. You know, back to what Vlad said, you know, make sure that you trust the people. You don't have a lot of legal recourse. but you can certainly put in things in place as an administrator to make sure that you're protected. And you can really do a lot to enhance your team, even your small teams. There's a lot you can do. So there's our contact information. I'll reach out to a lot of you after this, follow up, but Vlad and Chris are both great resources for you as well and their teams. And, I know we went a little bit over, but if we want to answer or have any Q&A, I'm happy to do that too, Jeff. Pass it back to you.
Okay, so can I get either the presentation or a link to this presentation? So when I send out my email, everybody will have it, because there's
Absolutely.
a lot of really good content here. And, of course, we have the recording. Sean asked a couple of really good questions. The first one was one that's been rolling around in my mind for a long time, because I actually hired an offshore developer to help me with some software. What are the obligations as far as withholdings in that? Like, I didn't withhold anything. Is there a liability there for the employer to make sure that there's US taxes withheld? Any thoughts on that?
From the way that I've worked with it is they function like contractors. So the way that you would do, you mean like an I-9 withholding? Something.
Yeah.
They're like treaty. I worked at a case like when it first came out in 2011 or 2012 and it was being enforced, where we had to claw back a lot of the money we paid because we didn't have treaties with those countries. I think that's what they're speaking to. Like Indonesia, for example, like 30%, we had to claw back 30% to make our earnings payments back to those people. But that's money that was income that they had earned. And I think that's a little bit different than contracting.
Yeah. Okay. And then Sean, you had a technical question on Mozilla VPN. Any thoughts? Okay.
Yeah. So, with regards to sort of security like that, I've never had any negative thing to say about using VPN or Mozilla VPN, especially if it's on a smaller shop like that. The sort of the adage is a lot of sort of these attackers, they're not really pointed. They sort of just throw a wide net and they catch the lowest hanging fruit. And so, by using even a free to use tool that does end-to-end encryption like Mozilla VPN, you're already pulling yourself a little bit further out of that lowest hanging fruit. So, I don't have anything negative to say about that, especially if that's what you're using for your connectivity between devices for encryption. So, and as you move past that, the only thing I would say about that is making sure that the source of truth is somebody knows who's accessing what, and authenticating. Who are they authenticating and how are they authenticating, right? And that's where it goes back to user directories and active directories, understanding your environment.
All right. Thank you, guys. This has been very informative for this group. Like, like Steve said, we started on this conversation last week and you guys have actually filled in a lot of the blanks. So I appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to flip it over to Melanie.
Hi. How is everybody?
Good.
Yep.
Great. Yeah, that was really, really interesting for me as well. So this is the last part of our brand series. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then pull up my presentation.
Oh, you're getting pretty sophisticated here. Oh.
Oh yeah, no. Just the background.
Okay.
So we are building our brand and we're in the last stages of it. What you're getting out of this is developing the brand, understanding why your clients choose you, and creating kind of a personalized guide to better attract those clients. And since this is the third thing, but we're still going to talk about a little bit about who I am. So this is the why it matters, right? We're going to attract clients. And then I wanted to show you my latest adventure. So I also like traveling, and I just got back from a business trip. I went to Detroit for the first time. And this is a little on the right was the conference and where we were. And on the left, I woke up early and went to this little art installation, which was really interesting. Something that I've wanted to go to for a while. It's just a neighborhood that has a bunch of interestingly displayed trash, I would say. And it was kind of cool. So to recap on so now we're going to cut to the brand part. It's called the Heidelberg Project. If you ever are there, I recommend it if you like stuff like that. All right, so this is what we've learned so far. We're building out your brand pyramid, and we've understood what a brand is. So it's that truth of a promise. It's why your clients choose you, and what you put out there and their actualization of that. So your vision is why you do what you do. We did that in the first one. Your mission is what you do to fulfill that vision. And then your core values, how you act and behave, is what we covered last time, which really hones into what your strengths are and how you're showing up and behaving. So we're going to take all of this has all been kind of self-centered, and we're going to now start to focus on your clients. So we're going to take all of this and then put it through your client's lens. So today we're going to talk about who you do business with and then why they do business with you. And I would say this is probably the most challenging part of this exercise, because you're having to look through somebody else's eyes at yourself and assess yourself that way. But we're going to start off easy. We're going to go with your target audience, and that's who you do business with. And the reason why this is easy is because some of it is just answering demographics, and that's pretty straightforward. So this is where you can kind of take some notes to help build out what your brand is. So your target audience is who you do business with. It's the demographics and psychographics. So your demographics are measurable. They're pretty straightforward. It's like, what size companies do you typically work with, or what kind of clients? You could categorize this by income level, employee count, ownership structure, stage of business. And from there, who do you typically engage with? What are their titles? Are you talking with several different titles at the places that you're doing business with? Is the person that you first talk to the decision maker, or do you have to go through rounds of that? So wanted to ask, because I'm not sure, some of you I know work for yourself, and I think some of you have your own companies or work within a company. What are some of the different types of clients that you work with?
So you're looking for volunteers?
I'm looking for volunteers.
Oh, you can't. You're gonna have to call on them.
Okay.
I'll volunteer. So hi, Melanie.
Hi.
I started my business back in August. My focus is privately owned, profitable technology companies that range in size from $10 to $25 million.
Great. And who do you, since you volunteered, who do you typically engage with?
I engage with the owner and typically the general manager or president, and I have expanded that to engage with key members of their staff. So one way of driving my business is I continue to look to who else I can work with within the organization. So I have started to move beyond strict financial work to mentoring, coaching, executive coaching among key members of the leadership teams of those private companies.
That's great.
So, yeah, it is good. So Tariq, let's call on you, because I know you got a good background in all this.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
I've been voluntold, so here I go. I normally stick with 20 million to 80 million sweet spot, if you will. Below that, they can't afford me. Higher than that, I hire them a full-time CFO, and off I go. The question is, who do I interact with? It's typically owners or CEO. Generally speaking, anybody below that does not work out. I've tried it. I've been doing it for 15 years. So this is my sort of rough gauge, which I work with. Again, you get a phone call, you don't know who's on the other end of the line. You obviously have to have a conversation, and then you say, okay, who do you represent, the owners or the CEO or the management team in general? And at times it has happened, it's a sub of a bigger company. They just need help at that sub level. So does that hopefully answer that question?
Yes.
Yeah. So Adam, you're a little bit new here, so we'll introduce you to the group, and you can talk a little bit about what you do in your company and see if you can pinpoint what Melanie's looking for.
Yeah, for sure. So our company, we work with other companies to help them reduce their costs. And so what we typically do, the two different verticals I work with are nonprofits and then auto dealerships. And it just kind of worked out that way, that those were two sweet spots for me. On the nonprofit side, the threshold's a lot lower, and that's more of something that I just enjoy doing. So I meet with the executive director, who they're the decision maker for everything. They usually, for what we do, they don't have to go back to the board for. For the car dealerships, it's not so much an income level because that fluctuates. What we really look for is how many locations they have. And if they have multiple locations, then they usually hit some thresholds that we can find cost savings for them. And we work with the owners or the general managers. Same thing that Tariq was saying, is anything lower than that, just it makes it a little bit more difficult to work with anybody. So we work at the higher level with the decision makers.
Perfect.
One quick point to Melanie's psychographics. I love that term. The pain points is really my first point of contact to sell them on pain points. I upfront, I'll ask it, so what makes you call me? And they'll say, we got this issue, they got this issue. And that's typically, they're talking about 2 or 3 main points. And you start the conversation there. And then of course, forward them some solutions that this is what you can do. And at the end, I like that third point. What are their motivations? What do they want from your consulting, or what do they want from a fractional CFO? And that's where you're really trying to make the deal and say, listen, if you hire me, hopefully I can address 3 out of your 4 pain points, and then we go from there. That can lead very much into what Peter was saying. It turns into a gig, which is basically training their employees, mentoring them at times if they're a younger company, or even providing executive coaching. And at times, even CEO becomes your client to be coached. So it's interesting. Once you get in the scope of work changes by the day. I'm not going to take too much time, but it has even gone down to the level where CEO was having a divorce. So he's consulting with me and I'm not a lawyer. So, and his wife is calling me saying, what do you think about this? I said, gee, guys, leave me alone. I can't deal with this. So it depends what level of comfort they feel with you, and they will discuss anything under the sun, from kids' education to universities to whoever, whatever. So it's kind of an interesting thing. That's the most satisfying part in my gigs for the last 15 years I've been doing, is the personal contact you make, and you deliver on that if you can.
I love that you brought up the different things that you solve for people and why they're reaching out for you or to you. And just to back up a second, these questions are just kind of to get you thinking about these things. There's a bunch of other ways that you can assess what your motivations are, or what the psychographics are for your clients. It could be even like how they like to be rewarded or talked to, like how they process data, or, spit that out to you. But what you were saying is, they're coming to you for a multitude of different reasons. And you might start to see similarities in that across your clients. And let's say there's like 3 main things that they come to you for. And when you're asking them those questions or having those initial phone calls, you can kind of tell which one is the most important to them. So it might be similar, but you're rearranging those value propositions in a way to make sure that you're addressing their most adamant concern. And then the other ones are just kind of like a bonus for them. Do other people also build that relationship with their clients, or is there anything that's maybe, I don't want to say more straightforward, because any sort of relationship is not straightforward. There's a lot of like layers to it, but yeah, is there anything different from your clients, or like motivations why people call you?
Melanie, I would say that it's very lonely at the top for most of these guys. And other than for their better half, if they have that relationship with her or him, they can't really discuss some of these problems with anybody. So you become the sounding board in a way. And it's very interesting that they don't want a drinking buddy for $250 an hour. They do want a sounding board. And for that reason, straight to the point, what's your pain point? What can I do for you? Let me look into that and I'll get back to you type of thing. And it works. And after a while, it kind of develops into a relationship where you literally become their person with a second opinion. And well, I talk to these lawyers and they're saying this, what do you think about this? So they're kind of getting a second opinion, just like you and me will get it from a doctor, or second doctor for that matter, for a major surgery. And at times it's a financial surgery or something on those lines. Of course, M&A activities not too far for a lot of these companies. Typically, my clients in Florida happen to be older. They're trying to give it to their kids, or they're trying to sell the company because kids have turned out to be not so good. So it's kind of one of those things for me. Thank you.
I'd say that I've observed that working with a number of fractional CFOs, that it would seem that for a lot of these SMBs, the first trusted person they bring into their business, I used to think was the accountant. I got some bad feedback on that. Now I'm starting to believe it is the fractional CFO. I've worked with a lot of fractional CFO clients, and that is certainly the feedback that I've gotten.
Anna, you got something to add to that?
I think Tariq actually caught it mostly. I was going to say that the relationship changes over time. Like a lot of times for me, it starts very, very tactical. There's some emergency. They need financing or get through an audit. And then after time, it develops more into like the sounding board therapist type relationship. The other thing is, I think fractional CFOs bring to clients the group of experience that we have with our other clients, right? So we're seeing things, for whatever industries we focus on, whatever geography we focus on, we can bring trends or common coping strategies to our clients, which I think is great. They don't necessarily get that with an in-house CFO.
Yep.
Another good point is that you're not their employee, so you're able to speak your mind somewhat without fearing that you lose the job. And that's the part a lot of CEOs have confided in me and saying, you give it to us straight. I hate you for that, but that's okay. Because a lot of the guys want to, obviously, understandably, keep their job. The accountant wants to keep them. And a lot of the fractional CFOs tend to be a lot more independent than they will be dependent on one client, because you always have 4 or 5 people as your clients. For me, at least, I don't go beyond 5. So it works out, open discussion, bitter as maybe, but at least they see the benefit out of it. I don't know how Jeff, you or others may have felt that way, but I definitely do.
Absolutely. Yep. And I guess one of the pacts that I have with these guys is, I'm going to tell you what it is and what's happening. I don't hold back. I try to do it in as nice a way as I can. but they can rely on the fact that I'm not gonna yes them at all, you know.
Or sugarcoat them or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, right, whatever the right word is, but I'm there to make sure they're successful, you know, is the way I position it with them. Scott, you have some input on this?
Well, so my clients are typically earlier stage. I work with startups, and for them, they'll often come to me when they reach sort of that point of like really deep pain and got some problem that they need help with. They've often been bootstrapping, and it could be an operational problem. They're doing a lot of things themselves. That might be the only advisor at times, or maybe being a marketing guy. Or they have a cash flow problem. They need to borrow some money, and they want some advice, cash flow model to use with a lender, that sort of thing. And then usually kind of starts with a smaller project, like a one-off, and then they'll often come back for more, either a follow-up a little bit later, or they'll realize that they need somebody like me on an ongoing basis, and then we'll sort of grow that into either a monthly or a quarterly kind of advisory role.
Yeah, nice.
Great. So I think it's really interesting hearing all of you talk about this, and you'll see why, which is the next slide. So these are the strengths that people sent over, and you can see that the majority of them, well, actually, if you take me out of this mix, because I am not a fractional CFO, then you actually have tied, executing, and influencing, which I find interesting. So a lot of it is this like coaching, advisory piece that you've talked about and helping these people through. So you have to do a lot of influencing, and then you have to deliver. So I think it makes sense that there's a whole lot of influencing and a whole lot of executing with the mix of people that decided to send over these. And then also, if you take me out, then you lose 2 of your relationship building. That was lower on the on the scale as well. How much does that resonate with all of you?
Yeah, it's interesting the way you interpreted that, because I actually think the way you just said it is I work in teaching and influencing and strategy and all that over here. And then I literally view myself as being different when I go do the execution. I think differently. I go into execution mode, I call it, And so I'm over here for a while with the guy and everything. And then okay, I'll see you later, because I got to go behind my computer now and do this, So it's actually a 2-part thing in my world, the way I look at it. So anybody else think that way, similar?
I think I need to work on relationship building.
I know.
It's interesting to see though. I like it. It's good.
Yeah. And then if you wanted to know what similar trait you had, I would say the majority of them were just 1, but 5 came up as achiever, which is pretty interesting. And then also on the relationship thing, you just use your to build those relationships. So, Jeff doesn't have any relationship either, but he's created this community.
Oh, you just froze on me.
To do what you have to do on the other side. All right, so these are your strengths, or some of your strengths. And then if you did take it, just kind of be thinking about like, what are your strengths? What are those things that kind of make you unique? And then this is just a slide from last time, is more of a reminder, which is those archetypes. If you ended up taking that quiz, what are the things? I know there were some that were the ruler or sovereign. There was a decent amount that were sage, like that teacher mentor type. And there were a few that were, I think it shows up as like guy, girl next door, which is citizen, which is kind of like, you know, like your neighbor, the neighbor that you trust to watch your house when you go out of town, or like keep an eye on whatever. Those are those types. So thinking about like, that's kind of like who you are, your personality. And we're going to use all of that and your customers' pain points to develop your value proposition. So this is what your customers experience and how you stand apart. And this is, you know, like what makes you unique. So I'm going to give you a template, and which is on the next slide. And then we're going to kind of think through this. And when you have your value proposition, or just a draft, it doesn't have to be perfect, go ahead and share. So this is your template. So it's like you or your company helps who your target audience is, who want to solve that problem, and then what makes you different. Like, what are those strengths that you have? How are you doing this? And then just to elaborate a bit too, I know when Jeff and I were first talking about this series and how, and I was like, you know, and then I'm going to do value proposition. And we were talking about how a lot of people in this room have, you know, like, you are, I don't know, what are the like all the tests and certifications that basically everybody in this room has, Jeff?
CPAs, MBAs, CMAs, FPA, there's lots of them. Yeah.
Like those things are not unique to your group, right? So when people are looking to hire you, they're skimming, they're like researching, they're skimming people that have all of the qualifications. That's just the basis, right? They want that because they know that that's the expertise they need. And then they want something from you that's unique. And that's what we're trying to dive into here.
I might have an idea, but maybe this doesn't apply, but I know one of the things that makes fractional CFO unique is that they're not really restricted on how they can utilize their network. CPAs and lawyers have a lot of restrictions and how they can make referrals. And at the end of the day, it's still business, right? So people need to make sure that they're making the right referral for the right reasons, and that includes them. That is a value prop that you guys have networks that you can hyper leverage.
Yeah. All right.
Does anybody have anything off the top of their head?
So I think on this, I'm going to guess that in general, just based on the conversation we just had too, that our target audience is similar with some, you know, within a range. The problem we solve is similar within a range, but it's, you know, what makes us each different is what's unique about us. You know, like Tariq is different, and you know, like he just said, he handles older people. He's, you know, he bills by the hour, so his whole thing, the way he approaches it, is very different than the way I approach it. And I'm based on what I know about Anna, it's the same thing. You know, and Sean was on here earlier. I know it's the same thing with him. He's different. Scott, So we kind of all do the same parts, but then it's what makes us different that gets us the clients that we have. You know, so like the clients that like me the best are the ones that believe that I'm going to get them to the promised land. You know, which is different than fixing their books or fixing their problem today, but it's really getting them into the future. I have two clients right now that are starting, because of what I've taught them and shown them, they're starting new divisions of their companies. And these two clients have both said they will not do it unless I participate. And so and not just participate as their CFO, but participate in the business side of it, like literally as a partner. And so, you know, so I'm doing it differently. It's not, so I'm not as much, like Tariq was explaining, I'm not as much there confident, because the people that tend to gravitate to me, they want something different than that. They need somebody to lead them there, not a sounding board. It's a little bit different. And it's not because I'm doing not because I intentionally do it that way. It's just that's who gravitates to me. So I don't know if that helps, but
Again, each client is different. Some want you to be a sounding board, the others want you to lead. Some want the problems of financial and accounting off their table.
yeah.
They're good at doing what they do. They don't want one more thing to be worried about. So it depends. And again, whether you're billing monthly on a retainership basis, you're billing on hourly basis, that's probably, to me, it's a very secondary thing. I offer both solutions. And I've seen people who go from solution 1 to solution 2 over the years. And as soon as they, like, first year is trial and error type of thing. You're trying to gauge them. They're trying to gauge you. They may not like your dry jokes and they may want something different. So, so it depends. Once you build that relationship, after that, I have clients, I send them detailed billing and they don't want to look at it. And they say, we don't care what's on the second page. How much is it we're paying this month? End of story. And I have clients who will have a monthly retainership and say, well, you know, we thought you will do 10 hours. You only did 9, so can we get a discount? I said, come on, get a life. Give me a break. So obviously they're not my type. So on the other days, I may end up doing 14 hours in a given time and I'm only billing them for 10. So it kind of balances out. So every client is different. All of us are very different. We are all individuals. And it's not a cookie cutter fit all type of a thing, whether you have a CPA, CMA, CFA, ABC, whatever. I work with a lot of engineers. So it's funny, I call myself EBC and say, we never heard of that designation. I said, that's an engineer by contamination, because I've been working with them for so long. And it kind of breaks the ice and everybody has a good laugh and then off you go. Yep. So it depends where you pitch yourself. Enough on me. Thank you.
No, but you're right. I mean, that's what makes, so I go to my happy place. So I could handle anything. I'm just typical financial person, you know, they want me to fix their books, I'll fix their books, but I don't like it. And so I tend to gravitate to clients and they gravitate to me that want to do something different and are looking for a leader rather than just somebody to, you know, fix their books. So it's just, so to me, that's my target market, you know, and that's the kind of people that I like to move into. Either way works, but.
Yeah,
Right.
and you can have different, like within your target audience, there's segments of that. And those people will be motivated slightly differently. They're going to want something different. Yep. But at the end of the day, you're still selling them basically the same thing. Mm-hmm. And then you have to really figure out, like, what is this commonality between them? Like, this is very hard. I do this for a living. This is the hardest part of building a brand, like it takes me the longest time to do this. So like trying to get you to write it in 10 minutes is hard. So, and I don't expect anybody, if you have written something, like, I don't expect that to be the end all be all. Like it's like something that's really difficult. So it's, you're really trying to see it through their lens. And, if you've had feedback where people are like, after they've been working with you for a while, like, I really like this, or like, I like how you're straightforward, or you're the one that's going, like, that helps me actualize my vision, right? Or expand the vision that I didn't even know I had. Something like that is kind of the unique selling point of it, no matter like kind of what you're giving them, if that makes sense. Does anybody want to be super brave and
No.
say what makes you different?
I think it's a matter of clicking with somebody, right? It's just like any other relationship. If you have clicked, you're great. If you haven't clicked, you will find out within about 3 to 6 months. And, thank you, we found another person, good night. If you have clicked, it's hard to even let go of some people, because I had a situation where the business has gone down to a point where they can't afford me, and I'm telling them, you don't need me anymore. I'll be available if you really need me on hourly, as needed, call me Joe basis. But they say, no, hang in there. So I'll reduce my monthly retainer down to wherever bare minimum and say, okay, now is that good enough? Oh, yeah, we're okay with that. So it depends. You're kind of their life jacket. They want to still hold on. They may never need it. So it's a strange relationship. It's almost, I say to my wife that, I have this relationship with this group of people, and it almost feels like family. I said, they can never be a family. As long as they pay your bills, they are your family. I said, no, dear. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. All right.
And
So,
that's another thing. I have never in the last 15 years lost a client for money or had any bad debts, which is amazing. I always thought there will be some bad debts.
it is amazing. Yeah.
Because I take a retainer, first of all, to protect myself. Secondly, even when we have to let go and part company after a few years and so on, because the company is sold, it's like, thank you. And, a gift card comes with it, saying thank you and all that. So it's been very gratifying for me personally. I did not have that type of job satisfaction when I was CFO with Coca-Cola and some other big corporations, not to mention British Petroleum and so on. So it's to me, it's very much a personal business relationship, which you develop and go with it.
Okay. So Melanie and I have to be somewhere in 1 minute.
Fantastic. Okay.
Okay. So I will see you all next time.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.